villains in media are usually meant to be a force that everyone can rally against. The big bad that everybody wants to see lose, so good can prevail, evil can be vanquished, and the day can be saved. And you know, that's all well and good when you're up against Mr. Extremely Evil Baby Killer, the third son of Hitler. Everybody wants to see that guy lose. When the villain's ideals are so obviously wrong, it makes them easy to hate. For example, someone like Griffith, right? You see him do what he does throughout the story, and you know you're meant to hate him, and you do. Because, you know, he sacrificed the Band of the Hawk for his own power. I mean, fuck that guy. Or someone like Sho Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist, Mahito from Jujutsu Kaisen. You get the idea. These dudes are evil, and we know they're evil, so usually we don't like them. But things get a little more complicated when the villain's ideals aren't so black and white. When they start dipping into that moral grey area, and you can kind of see what they're talking about. That's when a villain, in my opinion, becomes truly compelling. And for the record, I'm not saying that pure evil villains cannot be compelling. I mean, I think Griffith, who we just talked about, is more than compelling enough. But when you can see from the view of the person that you're meant to be up against, it brings that villain to the next level. So in this video, we're going to be exploring some anime villains that kind of had a point to their plans, even if they went about it the wrong way, and seeing how evil they really are. So first off, we'll start light and work our way up. You know, I don't want to start off with the world domination stuff just off the bat. So let's start by talking about the first villain, Hero Killer Stain. The man who tried to cleanse the hypocritical heroes from society. Before I really get into the explanation though, I do need to preface that Stain, along with everybody else on this list, is still wrong to an extent because killing people, hot take, isn't really cool at all. Like if you go around killing off a bunch of people, no matter how noble your cause, you're probably not really that good a guy. And this makes sense, you know, because you need them to be at least a little bit of a villain. If Stain was some politician that went around implementing better policies for when it came to hero registration, he wouldn't be in the show, because that's boring. Villains are villains because their methods usually go too far. But with that all being said, Stain did low-key have a point. In a society with heroes, how do we make sure that these heroes are actually heroic? Because at the start of the advent of quirks in My Hero Academia, all the people who decided to become heroes did so of their own volition, because they wanted to take good into their own hands and protect people for no reward. But as soon as money and influence got involved, that's where things kind of went south. Being a hero comes with a big paycheck, power and influence, you know, public admiration, you name it. And Stain's point in the show is that being rewarded for doing good is inherently wrong. Well, that wasn't his whole point, but he thought that the business of being a hero was too full of people who weren't in it for the right reasons. Are you really a hero if all you care about is being famous? Or if all you want is to be rich? Stain doesn't think so, and honestly I have to agree for the most part. Take for example Endeavor within the show. Stain calls him a fake hero, and honestly he's right. Endeavor is not a good guy at all. He abused his family in the pursuit of power, and his motivations to help people are not pure. And yet, he's still the number 2 hero. And he gets promoted to number 1 halfway through the show. In the arc that Stain is the main villain of, he doesn't recognize Ida as a true hero because he abandons people in need to fuel his revenge. And he does acknowledge Midori as a true hero because he really cares about saving people. Obviously, killing 17 people because they weren't in the right job is insane, but the point he stands to make about a job being so intertwined with good morals being performed by people that have bad morals is actually a very good one. Even after All Might lost all his powers, he still acknowledged him as the true hero that he always was, and helped him get back on his feet too. He even helped him in the final fight against All For One. And speaking of All For One, once he was busted out of prison with all the other inmates, Stain specifically avoided teaming up with All For One because their morals were so different. And it was the same the first time he ever met Shigaraki. He has a purpose, he has morals, and he doesn't just blindly seek destruction. So all in all, yeah, he's not that bad, I suppose. Let's move on. I'm going to do a kind of half entry here, just consider an honorable mention, just because it is similar in a way to Stain. Garou from One Punch Man is similar to Stain in the way that they both wanted to change things about hero-led society. I do think that the start of Garou's story is just kind of a play on those like edgy anti-heroes we always see in anime, because when you actually see his backstory, it's just him getting picked on by some kids and relating to the bad guys in Power Rangers or whatever because they're unpopular like him. And that's not to downplay the impacts of bullying, because obviously, yeah, it sucks big time. But turning into a hero-hunting villain just because of that seemed a little off. It's only later on in the story that you see his true problem is the fact that the justice that the heroes give out is biased. Manga spoilers for this next part, by the way. I don't even know if there is any anime-onlys left for One Punch Man, but you know, just in case, a warning. After he turns into the strongest villain, he wants to become an absolute evil. an impartial and unbiased force for the world to team up against. And that might sound crazy, like he aims to destroy the whole world or something, but I don't think that's what Garou actually wants. He knows that people with a common enemy will unify, and he thinks that if he himself can become that enemy, then the world will be saved. A kind of backwards ideology when you really think about it, but you know, he kind of had a point. Okay, this one might be a bit of a controversial pick and definitely a less known one too. But next up we have Tsukasa from Dr. Stone. If you've never seen Dr. Stone before, pretty much what happens is everybody on Earth gets turned into stone by some mysterious force, and 3,700 years later, Senku, a really smart scientist kid, wakes up and he has to rebuild society from scratch. Tsukasa is a villain that's introduced early on, and whereas Senku's goal is to rebuild society exactly how it was, Tsukasa disagrees. He thinks that they should be selective with who they choose to wake up, and pretty much cleanse the world of evil before they go ahead with restoring it. And while he is a bit willy-nilly with all the destroying of statues, you know, he kind of just goes for old people all the time. When you take a step back and look at it, you might kind of be cooking, I can't lie. Obviously, cleansing the world sounds absolutely crazy, but if we're being honest with ourselves, some people gotta go. Especially after seeing all the horrific stuff that all these billionaires have been up to in the Epstein files. You know, if the world got sent back to the Stone Age, it would almost be crazy to just not do anything about them. Like, you're telling me if you got woken up 3,700 years in the future and you found Stone Jeffrey Epstein or Stone Netanyahu, you'd just be completely cool with bringing them back? Let me know. What I do disagree with Tsukasa on though, as I already mentioned, he's kind of just trying to create a world for the youth. And by for the youth, I mean it just filled with youth, you know, no old people. Well, yes, it is true that most of the people that are in power and make the world as bad as it is are all old. There are some good old people as well. Like Tsukasa, I get what you're trying to say, but I'd probably rather you didn't slime out my granddad. He also is kind of against scientific advancement because he stands against Senku, but I think that's more due to the fact that he'd rather avoid inventions such as guns and drugs and stuff. Not that he's like some kind of Stone Age purist. Like everybody else on this list, it is low-key just kind of crazy that he can kill people without remorse. But I think if you applied his ideas to someone that wasn't a psychopath, they could probably convince a good amount of people. He does end up chilling out quite a lot later in the series because, as it turns out, he kind of just wanted to cure his sister who he loves the most in the whole world. And Senku and science allowed him to do that. So they kind of just put all the statue destroying behind them and become best buddies. Hooray! Now let's look at the next one. Okay, for this next one, you're just gonna have to hear me out for this next one. When I say the name, I will explain my reasoning, but just hear me out. Next on this list, we have Meruem, King of the Ants. And I know, this guy is a complete psychopath that kills and eats people for fun, I know. But somehow, he changes. I absolutely love Meruem and Hunter x Hunter as a whole. The Chimera Ant arc is in my top 5 anime arcs of all time for sure. The development of Meruem throughout the arc and the almost like fall of Gon's arc throughout is just fantastic. I'll probably do a more detailed video on it at some point. But to give a TLDR for the story of Meruem, he was born with the promise to be king of the ants. He's the strongest of the ants by far, and he was born with them ready to do his bidding at any point and pretty much kneeling at his feet. He takes over a country easily, and he puts a plan into place to allow the farming of humans for food. All of this sounds completely irredeemable and absolutely crazy, but you gotta understand that at this point, he was like 1 week old. So as the story goes on, he tests himself against humans and starts to see them as outright worthless, you know, like they're the insects. Because all that he has seen so far is that he's stronger than them and smarter than them. That is, until he meets a girl named Komugi, the first human that ever beats him at anything. And after playing a game called Gungi with her over and over again, he still can't beat her. He starts to develop respect for her, he begins to develop humanity within himself, and he starts to question what his real purpose is. Throughout the arc, he transforms from a power-obsessed monster to a peace-seeking pacifist who actually sees value in humans. He realizes that they are, in fact, a worthwhile existence. And unfortunately, before he can reach his true self, he dies to Netero's poor man's rose. But, and this really showcases his development, after realizing he doesn't have long left, all he wishes is to spend his last moments with the person who he truly cares for, Komugi. While Meruem never really stood for anything or had any values that he stuck to through thick and thin like the other villains on this list, you know, he's not trying to purge society of wrongdoers, he does kind of the opposite. He gains his humanity. In one arc, he goes from a villain to someone who was well on his way to becoming a hero. And that is after being born and set up to become a tyrannical king with retainers who do his every bidding. And one of them who even goes against the progression of his humanity. At the start of his arc, he is a prideful and arrogant king. And by the end, he's willing to prostrate himself before a human just so he can play Gungi in his last moments with Komugi. Somehow, he became more human than ant. A very important theme throughout Naruto is the shinobi cycle of hatred. People do wrong to others, and those others seek to do wrong back to them. A lot like real life, of course. If no one is willing to forgive, then that cycle will keep going and everyone will keep murdering and hating and going to war with everyone else. And pretty much every villain in Naruto seeks to break this cycle in some way. There aren't many pure evil villains in Naruto, you know, they all have at least some reason for what they're doing, even if they have to crush villages and kill millions for it. Some of their ideology kind of makes sense. Like take Itachi or Madara for example, both of them just decided to take extreme measures to justify peace. Either by killing their entire clan or forcing everybody into an endless dream that they can't escape from. Obviously those seem like the wrong way to go about this kind of thing, but to them it probably seemed like their only way forward. But the villain that shows this ends justify the means kind of ideology the most in the show is Pain. Pain, or Nagato, was a child of war. His parents were killed by soldiers in the Second Great Shinobi War and he was left an orphan. He later met up with two other children named Yahiko and Konin, and together they all dreamed of a world where war didn't exist, which to them, who have only ever known war, seemed like paradise. They were taught by Jiraiya, and since Nagato had the Rinnegan because of Madara's super secret 100-year plan, he turned out to be extremely powerful. Skip forward a good few years, and Nagato and all his friends are pretty strong now. They formed the Akatsuki and their numbers are getting pretty large. But of course, because it's an anime and he's a villain, his best friend dies. And after that, Nagato realizes that seeking peace through peaceful means is pretty much worthless. In a world where hate breeds hate and everybody won't stop killing each other, the only way to convince them to give up is by creating an even greater pain for all of them. Pain, like the guy, like his name. You get it? Or like that's why he's called that. It's like a full circle kind of thing. Never mind. Anyway, Pain's goal is actually world peace, technically. Sure, exposing people to tragedy on purpose so that they can discover what empathy is does sound a bit out of pocket, to be fair. But in a world like Naruto, where war is pretty much never ending, this is probably the best way Pain could think of. People that have never known war and the devastation that it brings can pretty much never understand what it's like to be on the other side. After Naruto hits him with his patented Talk no Jutsu and tells him that he himself will break the cycle of hatred by not killing Pain, he realizes that maybe he actually did have it wrong. The thing about the plot of Naruto as well is that it's all kind of like a, oh, this guy manipulated this guy, who manipulated this guy, and so on. So Nagato did at some point have his morals corrupted by Obito, who had his morals corrupted by Madara, etc, etc. But once Naruto shows Nagato that the cycle of hatred can still be broken, he decides to believe in him and sacrifices his life to bring back the Hidden Leaf Village. So yeah, while destroying villages upon villages and killing all the tailed beast users and forming a ninja terrorist group are pretty crazy things to do, he did kind of have a point. I'm going to do a kind of quick draw thing for honorable mentions of either villains that I don't really know enough about or ones that would make this video way too long. You know, just ones that I feel like do actually still need to be mentioned. So first up, we have Lelouch from Code Geass. He was the #1 villain I seen mentioned the most while I was researching this video, but unfortunately, I've never actually watched Code Geass, which I know is crazy. I've heard that it's peak, but I've just kind of never bothered. But I've heard he apparently had a point, so he gets a mention. Next up, we have Light from Death Note. I have actually watched Death Note, and at the start of the series at least, Light kind of had a point. But I mean, he totally went off the rails big time as the plot progressed, you know, even though he was always kind of a psycho. He wasn't like a good guy that got dragged in too deep and got his morals corrupted or anything. He just actually did enjoy killing people and the power that it brought. So I'm not going to give him a full section, but specifically start of series Light can get a mention. Next up is Eren. He also kind of had a point. Like, yeah, obviously genociding 80% of the entire world is extremely extreme, especially when he knows there are innocents among them. But when you trap a group of people on an island with man-eating monsters and never reveal the truth to them, it makes sense that when they find out, they'd probably go a little bit crazy. So he kinda had a point. Anyway, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. I know there were many more villains that could have been mentioned on this list, but hopefully you enjoy the ones I did pick. I have way more videos like this coming out soon. I'll probably do one next on pure evil villains, so keep an eye out for that. If you're still here for some reason, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. You know, let's try and get to 500 subs. Thank you and have a good day.